Hello, everyone. This is Lala, and today I am here with the female version of the model, babe, heartthrob archetype. I talked about the men in the past video, and obviously I'm going to talk about the women here. And just like I mentioned in that video, I am not going to list every single good-looking woman to be on this video that have ever been on Big Brother. One, that's not how the archetype works. Two, it would be way too long. And three, CBS generally casts a lot of good looking people to be on their show so they can get high ratings. At least that's how they see it. I don't know if that's the data there's data that they have that proves this, but no. The people that are on here were either identified by their pageant like behavior and demeanor, their looks, whether that's how they were packaged throughout the season, or packaged throughout their intro and audition process, but they're usually seen as the babes. Their looks are come brought up a lot, whether it's by people who want to look like them or people who dislike them due to it, but they kind of use it to their advantage or disadvantage in the game, and it's definitely a topic of discussion. You can tell that a lot of these women were cast to be bikini bait, essentially, and showman's bait. So I don't think anyone from Big Brother 2 fits this, so I'm moving on to Big Brother 3. And definitely the woman that fits this is Lisa. I believe she was a bartender at the time of the season. There's a lot of talks about her being very hot and very good looking by a lot of the house guests. She knew that she could use her looks to her advantage, where people would want to work with her due to that and having proximity to attractiveness. She was brought into the big alliance partially due to that and due to her being the first HOH. But at the same time, it kind of caused a lot of people to not take her very seriously as well. And it was one of the reasons why she was at the bottom of her alliance and she almost went home that week. But she was saved by the other side of the house. And then when she started working with them, she kind of let them do their dirty work while she was just a nice, agreeable woman who was friendly and it got her the win. So there's really not a whole lot to say there. And I do think one of the reasons why she was seen as the girl definitely had to do with her looks in addition to her behavior. So she definitely benefited from pretty privilege. So, regarding the next season, I do obviously have Allison here, and I think she's arguably the most infamous example of this archetype. Obviously, she was a pageant woman, and the house knew that. And I think with the way she approached the game, it rubbed people the wrong way because she came off so obviously fake, but she was also very ruthless, and she was also very useful, and she was always ahead of the game compared to many of the other people, which is kind of why she was able to implement what would become the floater strategy. She also knew that she's considered conventionally attractive, so she used her looks to get in good with a lot of the guys. Obviously, the biggest example is Nathan, where they got really close. They essentially hooked up in one way or another, and then this caused him to eventually use the Vita on her. She flirted with her ex a lot, and she did a lot of these manipulative moves for the men. She claimed it was for strategy, but I just think it was because she was very flirtatious. But due to all that and her pageant-like ways, it got back to her to the point where she had no chance of winning despite her getting to the end. And she tried to change her strategy in Big Brother 7, or at least that's what she said, but she is quickly reverting to her old ways. And she burnt out as she was the first boot, so clearly she wasn't the most adaptable, and I think she's the only woman who's so open about weaponizing her skill sets that fit this archetype in this way. Chronologically, the next person on the list is Lori. There's not a whole lot to say here because she was booted so early in the season, but I do remember a lot of the men fawning and gawking over her to the point where it got pretty disturbing for her in quite a few ways. And then a lot of the women also talked about how stunning she was, but it also kind of brought some unwarranted attention on her. And it also caused people to feel threatened by her. So despite the privileges that came with this archetype, it didn't really do her any good or anything really at all. So, arguably, the most infamous example of this archetype is definitely Janelle, who competed on 4 seasons. So, just from her intro package, they had her wearing that. It was kind of lingerie, kind of not. They emphasized the fact that she was a bottle girl, and of course, she did a whole bunch of modeling shoots right before the season, so that was kind of her lane. She was definitely cast to be the attractive blonde bombshell. And it worked in the ways that it caused her to be a fan favorite, and people kept on talking about how pretty she was in the house and outside of the house. But it caused a lot of people to not like her and to think she's jealous because she came off as very vain. She was very into getting along with a lot of the men, and this is the thing through all of her seasons, and the women just didn't vibe with her. While there were times where she made herself look dumber than she really was, she was never really a strategic or a social player, and she was mainly liked because she was seen as a badass and how much she competed, or how well she competed in competitions, especially during her first 2 seasons. But the thing with this archetype is that it's very set on a certain age, as with Jenna becoming a mother, a wife, and entering her 30s and 40s, she kind of aged out of the archetype and her results were kind of diminishing. I did find it interesting that Janelle and Allison didn't really get along during the latter's brief stint on All Stars, and I think it's because Allison kind of knew that Janelle was the newer version of her, and she was kind of outdated in that sense, or at least by the time of All Stars. So there was that dynamic there, and they both kind of struggled to get along with women overall throughout their Big Brother careers. So we are officially moving on to the post-classic era, and of course, Big Brother 8 is the first season that fits this. And I'm placing Jen here, despite her being a so-called nanny. They definitely emphasized her looks a lot of the time in positive and negative ways. There were a few people who talked about how hot she was, and she always talked about her looks too, and how photogenic or non-photogenic she was. So it's clearly a focus. And a lot of people definitely used her looks against her, where they mentioned that that's the only thing she really cared about. She was very dumb, she was very vain, and all that. It caused her to get a lot of hatred, too, because she was just seen as the vain and vapid actor, model girl who didn't care for the money, who didn't care to strategize, and she judged people based on their appearances and all that stuff. So, as you go through this list, and I put her in the other archetype that kind of has her struggling socially, the manic pixie dream girl. So when you have that, so when you're part of both archetypes, it doesn't really bode well for her. But yeah, that's really all I have to say about Jin here. Okay, so I didn't really put anyone in Big Brother 9 on here because I don't think any of their looks were really mentioned or referenced much. But at least in a way that could be a heartthrob way. So I'm just gonna skip them. With Big Brother 10, I'm only putting Keisha on here because there's a lot of emphasis on her being a Hooters girl. And obviously, when you think of Hooters, you think of women who are wearing these very tight clothing that shows off their curves. But due to the dynamic of the house being a lot of older people and more unconventional people compared to the average Big Brother cast, her looks didn't play much of a factor. But I do think she kind of got how do I say this? I do think she kind of got deified in the house compared to everyone else, which may have involved her look not in the way that they found her hot, but they found her to be the perfect representation of whatnot. So I do think she kind of weaponized that as well. But yeah, she was known as the Hooters girl, so I'm just gonna put her here. And another note, obviously she grew out of the Hooter girl's image, hence her coming back on Big Brother 22 and not fulfilling that role. So there was a point in time specifically within this era where the model curse was a thing, where the women who were designated to be on the cast as the pretty models ended up being one of the first two boots in each of the next 4 seasons. So Laura is the example of this for Big Brother 11. It seemed like she was trying to use her looks on certain people to get them on her side, but it didn't work. And then a lot of people placed other judgments on her because of her looks. Remember, there was a lot of weird conversations about her boobs. Monet was this version in Big Brother 12, where she was the model, was heavily into fashion, but she was the second boot, partially due to her not getting along with a lot of the other women and being expendable. So I'm pretty sure her being the only non-white person also made her stand out, though she herself was half white. Then we move on to Cassie from Big Brother 13, who definitely fit this. She was a professional model. She talked about it all the time. And while on the edit, it kind of made it look like Brendan and Rachel were just kind of picking on her and she was the innocent victim. That whole thing kind of started because Rachel was defending Porsche, where Cassie made all the judgments on Porsche that really weren't accurate. And then she was kind of a pick me where she was very male centric and bashed most of the other women. So she just didn't get along with a lot of them due to that, and then due to her being on the side of the rookies with an event rookie dynamic just made her a huge target. And then we have Kara, who's also a model. I believe she did Playboy before the season, and that was talked about. She mainly went home due to her association with Dad and nothing of her own doing, but that also has to do with the vet Nibi dynamic and her being Dad's favorite player, which is why she went home. So these four women were booted very quickly, and they all kind of fall under this model curse. So Porsche from BB13 isn't in the picture, and by the time I remembered her, I kind of saved the picture already, and I didn't want to move things around or redo it. So I'm talking about her without her being in the picture. So Porsche fit the kind of Janelle archetype of being the bottle girl waitress that's known for her looks and was probably expected to be very dim, and that's why she was cast. And there's definitely a lot of talk about her looks and how people perceived her due to it, where a lot of the newbies didn't like her, and heck, even some of the veterans didn't really care for her. They just thought she was too stupid to really deal with. Of course, she stayed the first week because she was deemed a lesser threat compared to Keith regarding the veterans. Then after that, she kind of just laid under the radar for the rest of the season. She kind of kicked it up a notch in the latter portion of the season where she finally started winning competitions, but it was a bit too late. Everyone saw her as someone who's just very dim-witted and obsessed with her looks and just shallow and vain. So it didn't really help her when it comes to being a game player. But also, I forgot to mention, she also had Cassie, who I guess was in a similar archetype, really, really, really hate her. So I guess there's competitiveness between the two of them in that regard. To end this era is Big Brother 15, and I'm pretty sure most of you are shocked with who ended up on the list, and I definitely have to explain myself. So Gina Marie's obviously the most shocking one, and I didn't put her here because of her looks. But if you look at her intro package and how she presented herself within the first few weeks and what made it on the edit, her being a pageant girl was something that was very important to her characterization. And I think they wanted her to be the New York version of this specific archetype. But of course, when she got in the house and opened her mouth and told her personality, it didn't really pan out the way they wanted it to. Candice definitely is the pageant woman as well. She talked about it a lot in the house, and I believe that was also mentioned in her intro. And I think it's one of the undercover reasons why she and Gina Marie did not like one another, because Gina Marie was threatened by Candice, who, from what some people said, had the more prestigious pageant career. And adding on to the fact that Candice is mixed race, the likes of Gina Marie and Aaron felt like she didn't deserve her title. She didn't deserve to carry herself the way they did, and they thought that her behavior was fake, or they thought her behavior that was pageant like came from her white side or whatever. And Erin's on this list because she was a model at the time of the season, and I believe she also did a few pageants here and there. Both were talked about extensively, and I kind of tied her and Jean Marie and their dislike of Candace, specifically due to this, and it just really came out nasty. And she was clearly supposed to be the southern version of this. And she definitely had the showmantic vibe, at least in the first week. But in general, her awful personality kind of deterred her from this. But I definitely think the dynamic between the three of them definitely fit within this specific archetype. So I wanted to put them here and to kind of close the era with this. Now we are getting on to the modern era, and of course, the first season of that is Big Brother 16. And as you see here, I only have one person representing this archetype from Big Brother 16, and that is Amber. She was a model at the time of them filming this, so of course they didn't outright state that on the episodes, but she talked about it a lot. And there's a lot of conversation about her looks, where a lot of the men definitely had crushes on her and found her to be very attractive. And of course, a lot of the women did not like her, partially due to that, and they felt threatened by that. I do believe Nicole outright admitted that a few years later. And of course, another layer to it is that this is someone who's mixed, so she's not seen as white, though she has a white mother and has more white features than black features. But that's kind of just besides the point. They saw this quote unquote black woman, I'm using quotations for that, getting all this attention from the guys, and it bothered them, especially because a lot of these women were insecure about their looks, i.e., Nicole and Christine, or they felt like they should be getting all this attention, i.e., the likes of Victoria. And it definitely worked against Amber because all the men realized that the women hated her due to this, and they couldn't manipulate her as easily, so they kind of weaponized the whole Caleb situation to get her out when they wanted to, and it was all just very gross. Big Brother 17. I shockingly don't have a whole lot to say about the season when it comes to this category. I did put Jackie on here because I do remember there's a bit of commentary about her being referenced as boobs, which is just very awkward nowadays. I think she was like a da- ugh. She was like a dancer, like some sort of performer or whatever. So there's a lot of emphasis on that. And honestly, it seemed like outside of her looks, there wasn't a lot of coverage of her, which is really a shame because it seemed like she was getting into the game. But to me, it's clear that she was cast to be in this archetype. Liz and Julia, I ended up putting them here because they are the typical actor people who are cast for the show. But these two are prolific models, and especially with what they do nowadays, but that's a whole nother topic. It's clear that they're supposed to be the model babes that were cast, and there are definitely a few guys that had a crush on Liz, or who they thought was Liz. And then there's a few of the women who kind of felt off about her or them because they are mainly close with the guys, especially during the beginning of the season, and they weren't that close with the woman. But honestly, I don't think anyone was seen as like an unilateralist babe on the cast. But I think out of everyone, these two were the one, or these three were the ones that the producers thought was going to fill that role. So I do have two women from Big Brother 18 who made it on this list. Rizakia, I believe they mentioned that she was a teacher, but I know she did a lot of modeling stuff, and that was definitely a huge emphasis. I do remember a lot of the house guests talking about how stunning and attractive she was, almost like they've never seen an attractive black woman before. Obviously, she got into a showmance with Polly, and people didn't really think that highly of her as a game player, but they found her decent and likable enough. She didn't really deal with the same jealousies that many other women of color that fit this archetype do. But I do know that she and Natalie did not like one another, and I think it's partially because they kind of saw one another as the same archetype overall. And I think because she was so passive and Polly kind of just reduced her to her looks, it caused a lot of people to not take her seriously, and there was kind of a misogynistic air in the season at the mid-season point. With Natalie, she was a cheerleader. I don't know if she did any pageants, but it was clear that she was cast to be the attractive Latina. They had her in a lot of revealing clothing, and it's clear she was supposed to be showman's bait. a lot of things didn't end up going her way when it comes to being showman's bait, with her getting with James, but she was still very flirty with a few of the guys, and she had a failed romance with Victor. She might have flirted with Corey or whatever, and then Polly kind of used this against her during the mid-season, which led to their infamous fight, but he kind of stated what a lot of people thought of her. They kind of saw her as some sort of like Jezebel-like figure, and this came up again because when she was nominated against James stated a lot of the same things that Polly said about Natalie, though James claims that he took Polly out, or he was a part of that, or he flipped on Polly because he was being a gentleman defending his lady. So yeah, there's a lot of ickiness that Natalie got from the season, mainly due to her looks, but also because she was perceived as fake. And then, of course, there's the mention of her being as fake as her chest. So the fakeness and it being attracted to her looks was definitely a common theme here. From Big Brother 19, the obvious choice is Jessica. Just looking at her intro, they had her in a lot of revealing, curvaceous clothing. She was a bottle girl at the time, so it's clear she was supposed to be like the very sexy, seductive, white Latina woman who's going to get all the guys, and there's so much commentary about her looks, and that definitely was the case earlier on, and I do think it's one of the reasons why she was so not trusted, though a lot of it was just her attitude as well. Obviously, she got into a huge romance with Cody right from the get go, and then the mess of that kind of just took over her story from the Big Brother house. But you could definitely tell that she was definitely cast to fit this role, and while she did in the way that she caused a lot of drama, she wasn't seen as the sweetheart until she was forced into the underdog position. And there was less focus on her looks due to the position that she and Cody were in the house. Moving on to BB20, I do think that they wanted Rachel to kind of be the successor of Jessica, where they're both model girls or slash dance girls who were fans of the show. But a lot of people didn't really take Rachel seriously, didn't even talk much about her looks, and if anything, she was kind of seen as weird by a lot of the house guests, and because she was seen as expendable to her alliance, she was booted at the end of the pre-jury. Bailey also fits on the list, and it's interesting when a non-white person fits this role, but she's black, so it's even more interesting or different compared to the other mixed race woman that I have discussed. She's on this list because she's a huge pageant woman. She talked about it extensively in the house, and I do think that's one of the reasons why she was cast, because she was supposed to be that prissy pageant girl, pretty girl, and in some ways she definitely lived up to it. And people did find her to be pretty, but I do think that her impulsivity and her tendency to get angry very quickly and get very emotional is what stood out about her more than anything else. And I think the divided house and then her getting into a showmance with Swanky, who was booted right away, kind of caused her journey to be, I don't want to say derailed, but you could definitely tell that they wanted Whaley to be more flirty and they wanted her to be more of the attractive black girl, which she still was, but the focus of her journey didn't focus on that, if I'm making sense. So we have a pair of pageant girls to end the modern era, with, of course, Holly and Catherine from Big Brother 21. And the fact that they knew one another from the pageant world, I believe both are Texans, was a storyline in the season. It just kind of further emphasizes their spot here. And what's interesting about these two is that they had this preseason connection where they kind of got along, but then there's always this underlying tension, which was only further exemplified where Catherine and Jackson had their showmance within the first week, and then he moved on to Holly, and the way Holly went about it was just very nasty. But then the two realized that they needed one another, so they were very, very, very close. And then Catherine decided that she wanted to go up on Holly's HH so she could get more screen time, and then everything kind of just blew up from there. Despite that, I don't think anyone was considering the two of them great beauties, but due to their background and due to them being known for, or I think both of them had insecurities with their looks as well. That may have came from the pageant world. I know Catherine was more overweight, and then she lost a lot of weight, so she felt like hot chick entering the house, though she still had some of those insecurities, and then people kind of just made fun of Polly for the way she looked because she got a lot of work done. And I think she just had insecurities for other reasons, which we saw in her showmance with Jackson. And that's really all I cared to say about these two, but their dynamic with one another and them kind of being seen as beauty queens, or them being cast as that was interesting to watch. Clearly, from Big Brother 23, the only woman who really fits this is Whitney. She obviously was a mom, or she's a mom, but she's very, very young, and I felt like they wanted to give her the hot mom vibe. And there's a lot of commentary from the house guests about her outfits, whether they were very good or not, or they felt like she was doing too much and revealing too much for someone who was a mother, though she was only like 30, 31 at the time, too. And people kind of felt a way about her due to that, and it wasn't the best experience. But in general, she's just very forgettable, so I'm going to kind of just move on. So, with Big Brother 24, there were definitely a few Charmaine Beatty women who were cast, and obviously there's going to be more than one conventionally attractive woman here, but I laid my criteria for this category specifically, and I do think Taylor fits this one the best. Obviously, she was a pageant woman, which was something discussed at length in her intro and throughout the season overall, and I do remember there's a lot of talk about her looks for good and bad reasons in the house by the house guest, so I definitely do think she fits this. There's an air of her that kind of came off as a bit fake due to her pageant background and some of the isms that came with it. So she ended up taking a more passive approach throughout the season, and then we saw her kind of get into two romances throughout the season. So I've kind of already mentioned how non-white people within this archetype kind of or the trials and tribulations that comes with it. So I don't feel like I have a lot more to say. And you can definitely tell that her pageant background came to help her, especially at the end when she was in the final two with Monty, and how she was able to create that speech for herself. So she definitely knew when to use it or not, and she definitely used it to deal with certain people in the house. So yeah. From Big Brother 25, I ended up putting Riley here. She fit that bottle bar girl that was clearly cast to be the main attractive woman in the house, and during the brief time that she was in the house, a lot of the guys did gravitate towards her and they did like her, and she definitely felt threatened by some of the women, which we saw with Kirsten, but she didn't last long enough to make much of an impact in that way. But she was kind of deified after she was evicted by her allies, and a lot of them did stuff for her. So I guess she was impactful in that way. But when I meant she was impactful, I meant she didn't last long in the game to fully execute it. But yeah, no one else really fit this archetype more than her within that season, hence placing her here. And the main woman who fits this from Big Brother 26 is Leah. Obviously, she had the same career that a lot of the women on this archetype, or in this archetype, had when it comes to being the sexy bottom girl entering the house. And yeah, while she was in the house, she definitely got close to a lot of the men. And I do think that was intentional on her part. At first, it was Matt, but then he was all over Mackenzie during the 1 week that he was there. Then she got really, really, really close to Quinn and Joseph, who pretty much thought that she walked on water like she was Jesus or something. They would do anything that she wanted, and I do think she weaponized that at the time. And a lot of the men did see her as very attractive, which she knew, and she definitely used towards her advantage. She just didn't know as much about the game, where she couldn't take advantage of it at the best. Sorry, to the best ability that she could. But yeah, she definitely fits this, and I don't think it's a coincidence that there's less women in this archetype within this era. So, in conclusion, this ends the female list of the model heartthrob pageant archetype, and this ends the overall, no matter the gender, model heartthrob stat pageant, male or female archetype two-parter that I did. So I could have put a lot more women on this video, but I wanted to be very specific because I didn't want to talk about like 2/3 of the women to ever be on Big Brother, especially since they tend to cast conventionally attractive people in general. I want to be more specific and I leave my criteria out prior. So that's why this list is relatively short. So I only have two more videos to do, which is the religious god worshippers, and I'm looking at the list. There's not that many people on it, so it should be pretty quick. And then the gimmick slash pet slash camera whore archetype, which doesn't have that many people on it either. So both of those videos should come out relatively soon. I already discussed in the last video too why it's kind of pointless to create a video for the outcast. It's very self-explanatory, and I'm not going to do that for the racial minority since I've covered that through several videos. So we're almost done, and this should be published by the time of the Big Brother 27 finale, and the following two videos should be up afterwards. So once I'm finally done these, I'm probably going to do a bit more generalized videos. I'm going to do some Mount Rushmore videos for Big Brother, the challenge or whatnot, and maybe a few other generalized videos. I am toying with covering Survivor and The Amazing Race next year, but that's still a few months away. I'm not too sure whether I'm going to do that or not. So those are things that I'm looking forward to doing. Anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'll be back with more content soon.